think we have, and I think there's an interesting question when it comes to living your potential, right? It's how far do you want to go with this? How honest do you want to be with yourself and your life and your habits and your routines? And because like if you want to fulfill your full potential, if you want to be as honest as you can, right? If you want to live as honest a life as you can, it gets fucking uncomfortable. You right there?
Right, Tezza. Let's do this. Good stuff, mate.
Yeah, finally, huh?
Yeah, so here we go. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On a beautiful day.
It's phenomenal. Phenomenal. It's always beautiful. There's just some clouds up there.
Nice. Live audience there?
We have a live audience. It's always alive, wherever we are, right? We sometimes forget that, don't we?
Yeah. Everything's alive.
It's a process of remembering. It is innate within.
The argument is all wisdom is. Universal wisdom is, by definition, available in everything, in every incident, in every situation. You just need to remember it, relearn it, be listening to it.
Yeah. So one of the... So Terry, you are a part of a audio book club that I formed, and a book we're listening to right now, quite relevant actually.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how we listen to this particular book now, and lots of things in my life are actually... It's actually shining a light on lots of stuff. There are always lessons. It's whether you're attuned to receive them or not. And this for me is a big lesson, as we'll get into. But I wanted to touch on this process of remembrance, because the book, it's called The Naked Mind. It is about our relationship with alcohol, but it talks about specifically about a deer or an animal grazing. Anything that isn't pleasant that it eats or smells, they will avoid. Now we don't do that. I think we're the only animal to continue doing something even if it's not pleasurable, and that pleasantness is a signal to our body that it's not good for us. Not always the case, but more often than not, something that doesn't taste good is not good for you, so you just will avoid it. And I thought that's a really interesting concept, because all animals, that's a survival mechanism that's evolved over millions of years to teach that animal what is better for it and what's not. So in this remembrance, it's remembering those things that are innate and we already know that are good and not so good for us.
Yeah, do you know what? I think it's similar with like sweet and fat. Like the reason that we've got such a bad relationship with them is because they were so sparse, but they were so needed for our body. And now we've got a society that plays to those, I guess, evolutionary mechanisms. And alcohol's another one where we choose to do things that are self-damaging, self-destructive, but we keep going back to it and we keep going back to it. And it's interesting. I mean, my journey with alcohol has been a relatively turbulent one anyway, but it's interesting that humans are the one species that continue to do self-destructive things. And I think you mentioned remembrance there. I think that's learned behaviour. The Naked Mind touches on this. It's not something we do as children. It's something that I believe that society conditions us into, because we're not getting our needs met in a different, more natural way. So we look for things in addictive substances, and I mean not typical addictive substances like alcohol, drugs, nicotine, but even in things like sex and food, things that can, I guess, trigger that evolutionary mechanism which makes us feel good in the moment. It's like a temporary stopgap for what is ultimately a bigger problem. Like there's something missing underneath. And I think the problem you've got there, come back to the fat and sugar thing, is society then looks to these things and it gears up in a capitalistic way, and it provides you with instant gratification in these areas. You've got fast food 24/7. You've got porn on tap. You know what I mean? You've got markets that spring up, and they're some of the biggest markets in the world that play to these traits that we've picked up that are bad substitutes for what we really need.
Yeah, because it works.
Yeah.
It works for the companies that want to get our attention or our money, and it works because that's how you get a human's attention. It provides something that perhaps is scarce in nature, or perhaps it does something instantly.
It's a dark side of capitalism. I would say there's many dark sides of capitalism, but it's definitely one of the worst, where it plays to that path of least resistance. Like if your options are something that is provided on tap, right, and is pleasurable, or something that is going to be more holistically, more long-term, like happiness, contentment, fulfillment, but takes effort. You've got nothing. You've got no instant gratification. You've got to put the work in before you get the payoff. People are going to naturally default, without a conscious intervention. People are going to naturally default to the easy path, the instant hit, the instant reward, and then that just reinforces that mechanism for it to keep going back and back and back, and we become like Pavlov's dogs, conditioned to repeat these like self-destructive behaviors. I guess arguably there's not a big dog market for. There's not a load of dogs getting together saying to this one dog, "Oh, if you keep biting your tail, if you keep doing this self-destructive thing," you know what I mean, and trying to condition the dogs into it. But humans have got complexities in the way we live because of the complexities of the world. But yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I've been on a bit of a journey with it, like I mentioned. And I think it's a common journey. Like I, from a young age, I ate a lot of food. I played video games like all night at times. Like whatever those things that were making me feel good in the moment, they were the things that were getting the most of my focus. Then as I became like teenager, alcohol comes on the scene, women come on the scene, and whatever was giving me that instant hit. But there was nothing, and this is the problem with society. There was nothing. There was no signposts or no real structure or no education around what does a human need to thrive. That's not a question that I hear many people talking about from an angle of raising children, or like, especially not societally. It's not something that's discussed in schools. You've got these individual subject teachers that have got their own remit, and they'll teach you maths or geography or whatever it is. But nobody's looking at holistically, what does it take for a human to thrive? And with the absence of that, you end up with certain gaps. I would say notably in our society is like a deep connection, any real sense of purpose beyond day-to-day living, and they're massive, massive things. And with those gaps, they leave a bit of a longing, like a yearning in the soul, where you're looking for something, and then you've got these. There you are. There's sex on tap. There's drugs on tap. There's alcohol. There's nicotine. Food. We'll just give you as much of these things, the distractions, ultimately. But they can be such damaging distractions that when you compound that week after week, month after month, year after year, you can end up in some pretty dark places. I mean, to give context, I in my 20s, I ended up heavily into alcohol, partying, just mindless living, completely mindless living. I had a number of psychological quirks that I think realistically a lot of people pick up in their childhood. I mean, a lot of your personality and a lot of who you are and how you see the world is more or less set by the time you're 7 or 8 or 9 year old, right? Just based on what you've seen, the influences in your life, your parents, how your parents interact. And then later in life, they might not manifest until you're in these situations where you're doing a lot of drinking, doing drugs, whatever, you're up against it. And then these quirks kind of manifest. And the biases that you've developed throughout your life can send you on some different trajectories. Without sounding too vague, I mean, I'm happy to explore. So personally, in my childhood, my mother, fantastic woman, amazing woman, but she always liked to say, she would give in easy. So I had a conversation with my dad, and I'm a big believer that open conversation with your parents, especially, is really important. Obviously, when growing up, but also like in retrospect, looking back, because parents are just people doing the best they can. You know, like we need to separate that firm line. And I had a conversation with my dad just a few weeks back, and he says, like, even at the age of like 3-4 years old, I would be playing with my dad, good as gold. My mum would be out the house, and my mum would walk in, and I would start crying, and it would be because instantly she would give me some chocolate or something, like she would give me some like attention. And like at 4-year-old, I'd already fathomed that manipulation mechanism. Like I could get a hit of something that made me feel good here. You know what I mean? And it's profound to think I've done that at such a young age, and that's because it's unconscious. We're not looking to nurture what it was I was actually looking for. So then I've developed this, and that continues, like I say, into my teens, into my 20s, and I was never given boundaries. So then you go into boundary-seeking behavior, because humans need to know where the limits are. And that's a great thing about humans. We've got this drive to continually explore new frontiers in consciousness, in like geography, in space. Like, and I'm a big fan of that, right? I think it's how we've developed into these complex beings, but we've lost touch with so much important stuff doing it. So what is that? What is the price of that? That's a different conversation. I get that, but we look for boundaries. And with me, I was continually looking for where the end was. And as an adult, there's not one until you hit a rock bottom, until you get to a point where you can't do any more. You've done more. And then eventually, like, the house of cards you've built comes tumbling down. And I hit rock bottom in my late 20s. I mean, I'd stayed up for days. I was drunk. I was high. I ended up locking myself up my flat. So I had to climb on the roof to try and smash my skylight to get in. Fell off the roof, fell 2 floors, fell through a roof. Had to pull myself out of the roof and climb back up to try and smash the skylight. I was still kept drinking for days after that. It was a bad place. And that was because continually just keep going back to these mechanisms. And I hadn't identified. I had no purpose in my life. The connections I had were superficial. They were built around. They weren't built around shared values. They weren't built around honest and open communication and trying to fulfill our innate human potential. Like, well, let's become the best we can be. They were just superficial bullshit. So after rock bottom, that's when I started asking questions, and this was about 6-7 years ago. And I've always been a fan of first principles thinking, you know, like, so what is a thing? Like, let's strip it back. Let's take away what society tells you these norms are, like what a life should look like, picket fence, 2.5 kids, all that. And that's not to say that that's bad for anybody. If that's what someone consciously explores their own mind and decides that is what is right for them, then that's fine. But if somebody just defaults to that without asking those questions, then that's how people end up in unfulfilling, unhappy situations, because their model for their life has been handed to them by society. It's nothing. Someone else can't define that for you. So yeah, ultimately I asked these questions, and I kept coming back to I guess to me the two twin pillars of what makes a human life, and that is connection and purpose.
And how did you come to that after you're exploring your principles, hitting rock bottom,
Yeah.
exploring? Okay, let's strip it back. Like, what is important to me?
Yeah, so the process, I went around the world to get there, but then in retrospect, I kind of look back at the steps that led me there. And it was like peeling the onion, and I think a lot of self-growth is, you address one thing, and that you get that tied up, and then something else becomes overwhelmingly apparent. So when I went on this journey, I realized that my job, the relationship I was in, where I was living, nearly everything in my life was not fulfilling me. It wasn't good for me. So I had to strip everything back. I moved house, got a place in Newcastle, and just I spent a lot of time on my own. It took me a while to stop drinking alcohol, because so I thought the relationships in my life were unfulfilling. There's something around that, so I stripped these back, but I was continuing to drink. And it wasn't until I stripped back the alcohol. I had a friend who I'm grateful for kept saying to me that she could see that everything was coming back to alcohol. And we mentioned just briefly before the podcast how everything is interconnected. You can't just work on one thing alone, otherwise it's pointless. And I was trying to ask questions about what a good life is whilst I was still drinking, sometimes 4, 5, 6 nights a week. That's never going to be conducive to understanding myself, because I'm already starting from I'm not myself to begin with.
Well, it can numb parts of yourself.
Yeah.
It can close you off. It can stop you from thinking clearly. It can do all this stuff, which is, it's a drug at the end of the day.
Exactly.
It alters your thought patterns, and it can cause blockages and. To think clearly, there's certain physical things that have to be clear also. So yeah, for sure, that was playing into that.
Yeah, exactly. So when I stripped the alcohol back, that was the most profound step. After trying for months to control it, to just have a couple of drinks, because I this is the thing, when you give up anything you're addicted to, you will throw every excuse in the book. I'm not addicted, I can handle it, watch, I'm going to just have 2 drinks, and then it fails. Oh, it was because of this, it was because I had a stressful day. Oh no, I need it because obviously if I want to go on a date. Oh, I need it because I want to connect. I need to connect with my friends, I can't see my friends without having a drink. And you just think of justification, but each time there's wisdom in that, but you just don't see it. Like, if you need alcohol to connect with someone of the opposite sex, then that's not the person you should be connecting with. If you need alcohol to connect with a friend, then what's that friendship built around? And I kept hitting these walls until eventually, like, I'd fallen off the wagon that many times. I managed to stop, but to do that, I had to cut myself off from everybody for about a year. I'd pretty much see my parents, and that was it. And the thing with, like, alcohol is such an accepted substance to abuse in our society. It's such an accepted addiction. It's the only thing, this book mentioned this, it's the only thing that you get guilt tripped for not doing.
Yeah, it's the only drug on the planet that you have to justify not to take.
Yeah, that's it. Which is absurd. It's absurd. Which feeds into this thing, like, oh, I haven't got a problem. I might have a bottle of wine after work, or I might have, like, whatever, but I haven't got a problem because that's so normalised. But it's not. There's nothing normal about it. Nothing at all. And I think that taking it away, removing it from the situation, within 2-3 months, the level of perspective I got over it was profound. Like, almost everything in my life improved. Like, I could have conversations about sensitive topics without being governed by my emotions. I was clearer in my thinking processes at work, managed a team, so I could then spot things I couldn't spot before. My sleep, exercise, diet, everything improved. And then as the months went on, there was more and more revelations as to just how far-reaching this thing that I justified was. And I think ultimately that's what you've got to ask yourself when you're doing anything is whether it's worth it, what it gives you is worth what it costs you. But you can't make that decision whilst you are wrapped up in the addiction of it, because you're not making an honest choice. Your decision is biased by the addiction. So you need that perspective, and the difficulty there is getting the first steps to get that perspective. And for me, it meant cutting everything and everybody off. I couldn't see anybody because every social interaction previous had been marked by alcohol. So that's what it took to get there. Some people can manage. There's obviously support groups. Some people use AA in different tools to ultimately to achieve the same goal.
So you used the word addiction. So what for you did it take for you to realise you're addicted?
I would have told you that I wasn't at the time. This is the thing, like this is because to admit you're addicted, then like we all know that if you're addicted to anything, that it's bad. That means something's got power over you, right? And there's no way you could say, yeah, I'm addicted to alcohol, but it's not a bad thing. Do you know what I mean? That you just wouldn't be able to honestly say that yourself.
Yeah, the definition itself is that by doing the thing, it impacts on you or others negatively.
Yeah, exactly. So it's more you wouldn't let yourself get that point. You say, no, I'm not addicted. You make every excuse in the book. And it's because, and this is popular media in our culture, we have this connotation that addiction is waking up in the morning and swigging vodka out the bottle. But that's just one of many forms of addiction. And I guess ultimately, eventually, I realised that the fact that I was defending still doing it, meant that ultimately I had to be addicted because I couldn't. I was clinging to it. I was clinging to it for dear life. I was fortunate in the fact that a friend of mine had been through a similar process maybe about 6 months earlier, and before I give up alcohol, she would see me, like, we'll go to yoga every Tuesday night, and she would see me still rough from the weekend. I'd been drinking all weekend, and I was still like, my life was falling apart, and I would never blame the alcohol. So sometimes it's someone else's perspective on that. It's difficult. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this because it's hard to be the person to tell someone else. It's an impossible feat to. You show somebody the door, but they need to have that penny drop. And it was, like I say, it was a rock bottom situation for me. I'm fortunate in the fact that my addiction got so out of hand. Russell Brand talks about this, and it's interesting perspective. For many people, their addictions can fly under the radar for their entire lives, and they might live 50, 60, 70% of how good a life they can live, but they never have that moment of clarity, that breaking point, that I guess that junction where the house of cards come falling down, and they see the problems for what they are. They can just kind of functionally go on. And I was fortunate, like I say, because mine got that bad.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. There are a lot of unhealthy norms, and that's what we call functional. Just because you're functioning in this culture or this kind of lifestyle, a lot of people can function as an addict. It's like it's very normal to function as an addict, and I think just to bring in a little bit, because I think where we're getting to is understanding. Definitely for you, and understanding, okay, why to change this behaviour. The alcohol's the symptom of something deeper, something causing it. So, okay, just throwing away the alcohol, is that gonna? It's a big conversation. I listened to a podcast the other day. Connor Beaton has got a podcast called Man Talks, and he had a woman on who is writing or written Dopamine Nation. dopamine, and it's about addiction, and I think personally it counteracts what I believe to be the root cause of addiction, and that is connection and lack of, and not a human getting their needs met. Now she talks about, yes, there's room for that, there's room for gabamate, there's room for trauma, there's room for needs, but the big reason, I'm not saying it's one or the other, but I tend to think if you're a human getting its needs met, it's really hard to become addicted to something. But to draw on her work, she believes that humans have got to a point, and I always think of things that historically, ancestrally, click of a button, you said at the start of this, drug dialers on speed dial, you can get anything you want now, and that is the cause of addiction, because we are humans in this paradigm that we are so susceptible and hardwired to crave these things, sugar, which is so rare in nature, and it's everywhere. So let's not look for a cause, it just is. And it's a really interesting look in, because yes, there's room for that also, I believe, but I truly believe if you're a human getting your needs met, then addiction is something you don't need to worry about too much.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of that second point. I do think that it ultimately, I guess, doing anything, right? So if you get some food out the cupboard, if you have a drink, if you whatever you want to do, you're looking for a state change, aren't you?
Yeah.
Like wherever you're at in that moment, I'm not happy. So if you're hungry, you want some food. If you're sad, you might pick up the bottle. Whatever, you're looking for a state change. If your state is that your needs are met, you're not yearning for that state change. So I genuinely think that is the issue. And for me, like it's connection and purpose, and I would say connection primarily, but then even with connection, I do think I think connection in that Maslow's self-actualization, that striving to be the best version of yourself, the version of yourself that like to reach your full potential. But without that discussion of what it is you want to achieve with your life, where you want your life to go, without fearfully looking at things like I'm scared to think of the big picture, because a lot of people shy away from that, and we don't have enough conversations about this. We're not going to be here forever. Death is always at the door, and I think when you frame it in these kinds of grand, and it can be uncomfortable, right? When you think of it like this, well, we're not going to be here forever. You think you've got forever, and then you haven't. So when you look at it from that perspective, you need to consider purpose. You need to consider what sort of life you want to live, and not getting wrapped up too much in the day-to-day minutiae. But that combination of connection and purpose, to me, if either are lacking, addiction plugs the gap very easily. We've got a hole within us that only those two things can fill, but we'll throw everything else in there, from alcohol, from nicotine, from food, from sex, from love, from attention, validation, social media. Like, yeah, I'm getting likes, so I'm going to start doing more and more of these things that are so removed from who I am as a person, but I'm getting likes, I'm getting social feedback, I'm getting that instant gratification, which is meaningless, but it's making me feel good in that moment.
Yeah, for sure. It does. It is the dopamine hit.
It is.
That's exactly what it is. And I think there's entirely room for that conversation, because even if all your needs are met and you're existing and you're living in your purpose, we are still human with all these chemicals. And if I threw an image in front of you, if I threw an advert with bam, 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 and it's changing, oh God, what's that? And it's got your attention. We are these organized chemical machines, not machines, and we're essentially getting, of course we're getting jacked up on that dopamine. And I, for one, will admit, Instagram, all right, I'm done with that, so I'll swipe it away, get out of my screen, and then I'll go back on it, and it's immediate, and I'm like, wow. But it is quick. You can catch yourself. Okay, it's unhealthy. I'm going to observe that more and more. No judgment. There's no shaming, but just observe that behavior more and more. Because do we all have these unhealthy behaviors to a point with so much going on in the modern day? perhaps.
I think we have, and I think there's an interesting question when it comes to living your potential, right? It's how far do you want to go with this?
Sure.
How honest do you want to be with yourself and your life and your habits and your routines? And because, like, if you want to fulfill your full potential, if you want to be as honest as you can, right? If you want to live as honest a life as you can, it gets fucking uncomfortable. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. I think you're entirely right to mention that.
Yeah, like I think, like, do you want to just be, okay, I want to be a little bit fitter, I want to be a little bit healthier, I want a little bit more money in the bank? Or do you think, right, fuck this, I'm maybe here once, whatever anybody's spiritual beliefs are, the only thing we know is that we don't know, right? So yeah, there's a very real chance we're only here once. Do I want to see how far I can go being the best version of myself? Do I want to live any lies and carry that lie with me for the next 30, 40, 50 years? Or do I want to uncover it now and, like, pick that scab off and heal? And it's uncomfortable doing it, and I guess you don't have to do it all today, but it's how much you're willing to do that. And or do you want to just live this kind of comfortable existence where you get a pizza every Friday night and you drink alcohol every Saturday night, and then Sunday you lie around doing nothing and you let your body kind of stagnate but you're comfortable, because the comfort and the growth are very rarely compatible. You can live a great life and you can have comfort within a life where you grow, but if you want to just live the path of least resistance, I'm hungry, I want to just order this thing off the internet, I'm not in a good mood, I'm going to have a drink and get rid of that, and I'm going to just do whatever's easy and whatever's automatic and whatever society's trying to provide me on tap. If I choose that, then chances are that I'm going to not fulfill my potential. You've got to choose, and it's not as extreme as I might be making it out, but you've got to be prepared if you want to live an honest life, or you want to live your full potential. You've got to be prepared for the discomfort that reveals, I guess.
Yeah, and I think we're in large talking about our health and because your purpose can be conducive to your health. You could look at that, but our health at the end of the day is the choices we make.
100%. And it is, like, again, we mentioned just before the podcast started there, like, you can work on one thing in isolation, but like what I'd done, I realized that my life wasn't in a great place, and I tried to figure out all of these things. My relationships weren't great, I wasn't happy in my job, my physical health wasn't great, but I was trying to ignore the alcohol. I was like, yeah, we'll just leave that over there. If I cut it down, if I just drink on a Friday or a Saturday, if I just drink on a Friday, if I just have this number of alcohol, this number of drinks. But I wasn't honest with myself in that area. And I think you've got to turn over every rock, and physical health is one of the biggest pillars of that. You can't, like, these things don't operate in isolation. Physical health and mental health, the health, you know what I mean? Like, these are two ends of the same thing.
The only way you can separate the mind and the body is verbally.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, if you eat, I mean, I'm guilty every once in a while. I'm not going to say that 100% of the time I eat healthy, holistically, like Paleolithic diet, whatever. I will treat myself on occasion, and I think there's a balance there. We are humans, and it's good to enjoy life. You know what I mean? You don't want to, in my view, you don't want to live this ascetic existence where you just, like, sit in the cave and meditate 14 hours a day, then go to sleep on your rug and get up the next day and start again. Like, there are things that I believe we are here to experience and enjoy, but it's who is in control. Is the thing in control, or are you in control? And if you're in control, why are you making that decision? Like, for me, if I ever make a bad decision with food, which I'm guilty of on occasion, it'll be because I haven't prepared. It's late at night, it's convenient, and it's the path of least resistance, and I'll observe it. And now, as many times as I pick my phone up to order something, I'll put my phone back down, because you can observe that. Once in a while you fail, you know. And I think once in a while, I don't think you should strive for perfection. I think, my view anyway, I think there's something to be said of enjoying certain pleasures in life, but at what cost is always the question that I default to. You know,
What are the consequences?
what are the consequences? Am I aware of the consequences? Am I aware that if I eat this, whatever it is, I mean, I love Asian food. I'm looking at the fact Asian food's relatively healthy. It's veg, it's meat, it's a bit of rice. You know, that tends to be my treat. But if I have certain things, like that food is going to affect my mental health, the next day I'm not going to spring out of bed like I normally do and feel as good. I'm not going to maybe do as much work or be as present in my connections or do my best performance in the gym or whatever. And that stems from the food. So, okay, what's the problem there? There's a lack of organisation before that. Have I not prepared well enough? You know, and you just keep peeling it back, and it gets uncomfortable. But I think it's got to be done, in my view, anyway.
No, I think it's right. I think you articulate yourself really well, also, and the self-development side of things. I think that's really key to you, isn't it?
Yeah, like it wasn't. God, I mean, who I am today is far removed from who I was 6 or 7 years ago. But I guess the thing is, when you take one thing away, you get, all right, okay, that's much better. If I'm not drinking, that I've got such a perspective on everything else. Oh well, hold on, yeah. Now that alcohol isn't affecting my mind, I can see this friendship or this relationship in my life for what it actually is, and it's not a very healthy relationship. Where we're not being there for each other. It's not the best we could be, and this comes to discomfort. Sometimes that relationship's never going to be right. Sometimes we're not, like, two people aren't right for to be friends or anything else. Like, some relationships aren't meant to be, and they're some of the most difficult parts of personal growth, because you have to have that conversation. You have to have it for both parties. It wouldn't just be for me. If me and that other person aren't singing from the same hymn sheet, if we aren't on the same level with, like, the reciprocity of the relationship, then it's always going to become damaging to both of us. So then you get rid of that connection, and then you think, right, okay, I've got more space in my life now. I feel a bit empty. I feel like I'm not fulfilling my potential. I feel like I'm not being creative, for example. And you just continue on that path, continually asking, is this what a human life should be? For me, by my own rule book. You know, I think each of us have got a set of beliefs, how we see the world, and each of them are different based on our unique conditioning and the unique experiences through which we've travelled. That's fine. I think what layers on top of that is your value system. What is important to you, right? And I don't think there's an objective definition of that. I think that's subjectively. To some people, tradition and family and security and safety may be important, and they're fantastic things. To other people, exploration and creativity and travel and these things aren't always compatible. But that's fine. They're all great values, but you need to figure out what they are, and then that's the foundation to which you decide to build your life, I guess. Mm-hmm. And that is part of the path that I went on simultaneously whilst I was giving up alcohol. And that's the only way I think that I managed to do it, because I was coming to the realization that I didn't have a creative outlet. I didn't have good relationships where I was able to be myself, honest, raw, unfiltered. This is who I am, because I was scared of judgment. I was scared of that. I was scared of that rejection, you know, and that's just a natural instinct, because connection is so important. We've evolved. Connection meant life or death back in tribesman days, you know, like if you weren't accepted in the tribe, you wouldn't survive in the wild by yourself. We were group hunters, you know, like we would defend each other. If one took ill, the rest could feed that person in the tribesmen until they got well. If you are shunned from society, even going back a few hundred years, if you are shunned from a town or a family, even, you couldn't survive yourself. So it's very ingrained how important connection is. Mm-hmm. So I think that fear of rejection,
it's real.
Yeah. It's
very
real.
real.
God, so real.
Very real. It's very stifling as well. And one of the I was reading today, isolation is it could be the world's biggest factor for what's the words, allowing death to be earlier, like bringing death a bit earlier than should be the case, like isolation. And what we're doing to kind of understand and mitigate that.
Sorry, where's the efforts
Where's the
conversation around this?
If we're all about safety and all, I guess we're going into a different...
No, but it is. It's connection.
Yes.
That connection is and I agree completely with what you said.
If you think safety's first and right, I want to make sure I'm alive, then make sure you've got some good connections.
100%.
Because that is going to see you into old age so strongly.
Yeah.
And so well. The connection piece is massive. I mean, I've navigated my own alcohol journey. I still am. I'm still like thinking a bit too much than feeling when I go into situations with alcohol. And I'm going to a wedding on Friday, and I'm thinking to myself and feeling into if I'm gonna drink or not. And I'm like, there's a battle there. There's an internal struggle going on. Do I want to drink? Do I not? Benefits, connection. Am I really connecting with people? Or what is me and the observer when I go and drink at that occasion? When are my conversations is strong? Probably not. Like the one of the biggest factors for me, because I've stopped drinking now. I don't drink. That I haven't drunk in 6 months, a year, longer. I might have the old pale ale now and again, depending on setting, like any drug.
Yeah.
So I tune into that, where I am, what I'm doing. But no, I the more I feel into it, the more of it's a feeling I'm trying to get to, and I have been trying to get to with alcohol. It's a shortcut to a feeling that I want. Now the long game is that I would reduce my drinking and try and develop that connection and that presence, because that's what alcohol did for me. It drew me into the present. It quieted the mind. Well, what I thought was quieting the mind will actually compound the next day.
Numbing the mind.
Yeah, numbing the mind, as we're alluding to with the book. It's like it really does numb certain parts of the brain. So it's not relaxing you. It's not distress. It's not it's not lowering your stress levels. But it's that's what it was doing for me. That's what it was. It was bringing me into the present more. But I can attain that feeling. It's like dance. I won't get on the dance floor unless I've had a drink. Well, but surely the mission will be, let's get on that dance floor, because there is a state you can achieve without the alcohol. And how much better would it be to not feel judged, not feel like you can't move in a direction, because your dance moves will be better if they're conscious.
Yeah.
Rather than
you might not feel that way, but there definitely will be. Yeah.
But it's amazing conversation to tune into, and the sober curious, and how about I go into this situation and not drink and just observe and just do it as an experiment. That's all you need to call it. I'm just experimenting and seeing how I feel, and then just tune into that and see what goes on.
Yeah, like at first, the excuses that I had, like I was single, so I was dating. So the idea of going on a date, like people would want to drink, it takes the edge off you. And all of these social situations I would throw up as excuses for to continue to drink. Like I needed them. Like I needed alcohol for it to be present in those situations, which is absurd considering it's the opposite, isn't it? Like
it really is.
Alcohol never makes us more present. It never makes us more ourselves. Like it takes, even from the first drink, it starts to take us away from ourselves, and that is a big price to pay, especially if we only see people socially in these certain situations. It meant that some of my friends never knew who I was. I've been friends with them 15 years, but they had no idea who I was, because every time I'd seen them, I was drunk. And they were drunk. You know what I mean? We were all drunk.
It's profound, really.
It is. And what sort of life is that to live? Mm-hmm. That the people who are your closest friends never know who you are. That when you start looking at it from this angle, I mean, you've got financial cost, you've got how many hours and days of prime health and mental health you lose. But just that idea that every time I see my closest friends, they never knew who I was. That's just that's a big. I think life is like a mansion, and that's a big room in that mansion. Like, have an honest conversation. You know what I mean? Like, people will spend their entire lives in just one little pantry. They'll never explore. You know what I mean? Or they might only do it under alcohol. They'll only dance when they've had a drink, right? And it takes a lot. It does. You've got to push yourself past that. I mean, I went on holiday with the lads at one point to Poland, and they were drinking from like 10 in the morning. You know, as lads holiday do. And I was sober for the whole week. Wow. And that was something that these are people that I'd always just drank with. And at the end of the week, I thought, this is going to be strange. At the start of the week, they were all like, you know, are you okay? Are you still the same person? You know? And they try like, yeah, have a drink. And I just, nah, I'm cool. It was after a while, you know, it wasn't obviously early in the journey. And then by the end of the week, one of the other guys has stopped drinking because he's seen me getting up in the morning and still being full of life, and them just being all, those guys just being pretty dead. So by halfway through the week, one of the other guys was sober with me. By the end of the week, the other two said that I was better, I was more present, a better conversation, I was better to be around that week sober. Now, I hadn't noticed the difference there, but obviously I haven't got a clear view of what I was like previously on alcohol. But they basically said we enjoy you better when you're sober, you know? And like, that was like, wow, okay. So there's me thinking, oh, you know, I have a drink because I'm more sociable, I'm more outgoing or whatever else. But that's just such a poorly conditioned subjective experience that it's not even true, you know?
Yeah, it could even be feeding into that same bias that is an addictive mindset. It's justifying something which isn't even true, perhaps.
Exactly, and that's the problem when it comes to addiction. Alcohol is a very addictive substance, so all of our views around it, we continually let it. We use these sometimes just societal views, sometimes like these odd experiences that aren't even accurate, and we'll put it onto the addiction like armor. So as soon as anybody attacks that addiction, we've got, no, I'm more sociable on alcohol. I'll be able to be more fun. I'll dance. I'm more friendly. I'm this. It helps me to open up. It does this. And they're just, most of them are bullshit, you know. Most of them don't stand up to scrutiny. And as soon as you just do these things, as many of the things that everything that you feel you need alcohol for, do it without alcohol, number of times, and then decide whether you need alcohol. Because to me, it always takes me away from being present and from connection. And then you think, comes back to what does it cost? What's the price you pay? And every time I look at it with alcohol, the price is too much. And it's, you know, it's like you feel like you mourn that part of your life. You know, like I used to, because you enjoy it. You know, it is an enjoyable thing. It's subjectively enjoyable when you're in it. But for those 2 or 3 hours of fun and pleasure, you pay far too much. And every experience you get via alcohol, you can get without. It just takes that little bit more effort, you know? I think...
Jesus Christ. So if you're listening, you would have no idea what we're experiencing. I think the biggest challenge is sitting on a rock when the sea is about to overflow and submerge you. Before that, you just hold this.
Yeah. This is a analogy of addiction. Okay, you think everything's fine, but the tide is slowly coming in.
Just yeah. You know, we're fine. We picked a good rock to stand on. Glad we picked this rock, by the way, because
the other one's gone.
You'd have just in our heads. So yeah, man, let's wrap it up before the sea does submerge us. Yeah. I'm sure it's been quite nice to watch this podcast as you see the sea level rise in every direction around us. It'd be funny if we just stayed here constantly just going
and just the hand. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing, man. Thanks for everything you've said, and yeah, the journey you've been on. I think that's it's good. It brings it's brought you some amazing wisdom and metaphors for life and all the rest of it. It's a true testament to kind of what you can, after hearing from your rock bottom moment.
Yeah.
Like what someone can use in that situation and use it as you've got to hit rock bottom to kind of come all the way back up and see everything. So it's that, I'm sure there's a quote in there about rock bottom. I could use it was better than that, but like it's a true, like, you got to bounce from that point and come back up, because sometimes we don't change things until you have to.
Yeah.
And you're forced to. Just trying to have the wisdom that you don't have to hit rock bottom to change that is also important, you know.
Absolutely. Like, sorry, Chris, just honesty. It's just having the honesty to that my hoodie floating away.
No, that's my jacket.
It's just, you know what, I would always say, just be honest with yourself. That's the key. You don't have to hit rock bottom. You just have to have honest conversations with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think we may have to wrap this up.
That's all right. I'll go and get it in a bit.
Just a bag, just like flowing out to sea.
I don't know what that is, but that's something as well. It's like a camera lens just floating in the background. No, we're all good. We've got to wrap this up, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time, bro.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'd love you back on again. This has been a joy to delve into this meaningful stuff, man.
Yeah, good luck to anybody on the same journey, you know.
Yeah. When you're writing your book?
Yeah. So subscribe to my podcast.
Everyone's got a podcast.
Yeah. There'll be a book at some point. Maybe it's 2022.
Yeah, man. You're the busiest man I know. This is a pleasure to be sat on this rock
on the
with
list. Yeah.
Anything you want to say? Wrap this up.
No, do you know what? I reiterate, just have honest conversations with yourself, because even though it's more difficult and painful, it's so much more fucking rewarding. It's all like, there's no two ways to look at it. It's always better to have the honest conversation, go through the pain, and the pleasure is so much sweeter. So yeah, good luck, everyone.
Love you, man. Thanks.
Yeah, likewise, man.